From the man who tamed the West, to the man who invented cool, to the most important entrepreneur in all of human history. My name is Vince Coiner, and this is Gratitude for America, a weekly wrap-up. Cyrus McCormick, the most important entrepreneur in all of human history. Now, imagine a time when 80% of the country worked on farms, doing backbreaking work from dawn to dusk practically every day of the year. That was the America that Cyrus McCormick was born into in 1809. For thousands of years, a man swinging a scythe could cut basically 1 acre of grain a day. Well, in 1831, Cyrus McCormick would change that. He invented the first practical mechanical reaper, a horse-drawn machine that would cut and gather grain. He would soon guarantee any man 15 acres a day or your money back. But McCormick's genius went far beyond just mechanics. He introduced financing because farmers were cash poor before the harvest. He introduced advertising with customer testimonials, replacement parts, and written guarantees. By the time he died in 1884, he had sold millions of reapers worldwide, with prices falling from $130 to $30. Today, fewer than 5% of Americans work on farms, freeing 75% of us to become doctors and baseball players and entrepreneurs and pretty much anything else we want. No one in history did more to free up the potential of mankind than Cyrus McCormick. If you started your day today doing anything other than working on a farm, you can thank him and the American system that allowed his vision to flourish. Asa Candler, the man behind the world's most popular drink. Now, imagine a time when that most popular drink was actually just an obscure, questionable pharmacy tonic selling barely 9 glasses a day. That was Coca-Cola before Asa Candler. Born in 1851, this Georgia pharmacist saw potential where others saw a simple headache cure. In 1888, he bought the formula for roughly $2,300. But Candler's genius wasn't in the liquid, it was in the message. He pioneered modern marketing, flooding the streets with coupons, plastering the logo on everything from buildings to clocks to calendars, and utilizing celebrity endorsements. He took a one-time herbal tonic that was selling relative drops and turned it into a gushing river that flows in over 200 countries. Today, Coca-Cola defines refreshment for billions of people around the world. He turned a nickel soda into a billion-dollar empire and the most recognized brand on the planet. So if you've ever enjoyed an ice cold Coke or smiled at one of their iconic commercials with the bears or the bottles, you can thank Asa Candler and the American system of free enterprise and individual liberty that let his vision flourish. Willis, the man who invented cool. Imagine a world oppressed by summer heat, where sweltering temperatures crippled factories and emptied theaters and made even being at home almost unbearable, where productivity plummeted in the hot summer months and entire regions of the country ended up sparsely populated because the temperatures were simply too brutal. That was the world that Willis Carrier was born into in 1876, and one he would change forever. In 1902, Carrier invented the first modern air conditioning system, mechanically controlling temperature and humidity for the first time, leading to the creation of comfortable, consistent environments. Invented while working at a Brooklyn printer, his breakthrough would spread everywhere, allowing factories to run year-round, towns to morph into cities in the middle of the desert, skyscrapers to reach the clouds, and theaters to stay open even in the middle of summer heat. Today, we enjoy cool homes, offices, hospitals, and cars, free from the tyranny of seasonal heat. So if you're comfortable right now indoors, taking a respite from the sweltering temperatures outside perhaps, you can probably thank Willis Carrier and the American system of individual freedom and capitalism that let his visionary solution flourish. Madam C.J. Walker, America's first self-made female millionaire. Imagine a time where opportunities for women were practically non-existent. That was the America Walker was born into in 1867. The daughter of former slaves, orphaned at 7 and widowed by 20, the odds were stacked against her. In 1906, she would invent a line of hair care products for black women that incorporated beeswax and fragrance and was much less harsh than most of the items on the market. Her genius went far beyond products, however. She developed the Walker system, building an army of 20,000 sales agents across the country, teaching them to build their own businesses. At a time when the average American wage was under $60 a month, her agents could earn up to $15 a day. If you admire the spirit of entrepreneurship that can uplift entire communities, you can appreciate the adventure of Madam C.J. Walker and the American system that allowed her to flourish. Joseph Glidden, the man who tamed the West. Now imagine a Wild West that was actually wild, where chaos reigned. Farmers fought ranchers, cattle roamed on crops and railroads, and violence erupted because there was no affordable way to mark the end of one man's land and the beginning of another. So in 1873, the 60-year-old Glidden invented the solution, modern barbed wire. Unlike earlier failed attempts, his design locked the barbs in place without maiming people or livestock. It was simple, effective, and cheap. Farmers, ranchers, and railroads bought millions of miles of Glidden's wire. It brought order to chaos by effectively sectioning off land and allowing the Great Western Migration to flourish without constant conflict. Now, if you can appreciate a well-oiled meat and dairy industry, you could probably thank Joseph Glidden and his American system of liberty that gave the opportunity to him to flourish. John A. Roebling, the man who crossed an ocean and built a bridge. Imagine a world where the size and length of suspension bridges was severely limited, and crossing a major waterway could be dangerous under the best of circumstances. That was the world that John A. Roebling saw when he immigrated from Prussia to America in 1831. Initially trying his hand at farming, he soon realized he was in the wrong business. He abandoned the plow to reinvent the bridge. Having studied engineering and architecture in school, Roebling understood that the biggest limitation for suspension bridges was the hemp ropes that most were supported by. He thought a robust steel cable made of smaller twisted wire would be far stronger, far more durable, and would allow bridges to be far longer. And so he established a company factory to do exactly that. His company would eventually produce wire for bridges around the world, including the Golden Gate Bridge. But his masterpiece wasn't wire, it was an actual bridge, the Brooklyn Bridge. An engineering marvel that defied gravity and united a city. He would actually never see it. He died from an injury sustained while surveying land for it. And his son would go on to build the bridge using his designs after his father died. So if you've ever walked across the Brooklyn Bridge or been on any giant suspension bridge, you can thank John Roebling and the American system that beckoned him from across the ocean. Milton Hershey, the man who sweetened the world. Imagine living in a time where chocolate was a luxury that only the rich could afford and everyday children could barely dream about. Well, that was the world that Milton Hershey was born into in 1857. A fourth grade dropout but natural entrepreneur, his first two candy businesses ended in bankruptcy, but he refused to give up. After learning the secret of using fresh milk to make candy, he sold his successful caramel company for $1 million and then bet everything on a new dream: affordable, mass-produced milk chocolate candy. He built the world's largest chocolate factory in rural Pennsylvania, naming the town Hershey, and then transforming a simple treat into an affordable joy for everyone. But he built more than just a factory. He built a town and a community and a school for children in need, eventually donating his entire fortune to the trust that still runs that school today. So if you've ever enjoyed a Hershey's candy bar or some Kisses or Reese's Pieces, you can thank Milton Hershey and the American system of free enterprise that allowed a poor apprentice to persevere and build an empire that gives back. Ray Kroc, the late bloomer who supersized the American dream. Imagine a time when fast food was anything but fast, affordable, or consistent. Well, that was the world that Ray Kroc lived in for most of his life before he found his calling. Born in 1902, he would drop out of high school and lie about his age so that he could drive ambulances during World War I. After the war, Kroc would spend the next 30 years hustling, selling paper cups and real estate and peddling milkshake mixers. But in 1954, he found his destiny out in San Bernardino, California, at a burger stand that was using 8 of his mixers. He looked at the McDonald's brothers' speedy service system and saw not just a restaurant, but a revolution. He began franchising for the brothers, favoring hard-charging operators over wealthy investors. Yet his genius wasn't just the burgers or the franchising, but the real estate. By owning the land the restaurants sat on, Kroc would eventually buy out the brothers and build McDonald's into the largest restaurant company in the world, feeding nearly 1% of the world's population every single day. So if you ever grabbed a quick meal that was actually quick, you can thank Ray Kroc and the American system that allowed a middle-aged door-to-door salesman to reinvent himself and build a worldwide empire. Steve Jobs, the man who made tech human. Imagine a time where computers were these complex machines with clunky, cryptic command lines that baffled the average person, where music was trapped on an album or in a CD box and the internet was stuck on a computer. Well, Steve Jobs, born in 1955, would take on all of those challenges and win. In 1976, he co-founded Apple, dreaming of a computer in every home. He championed the graphical user interface, icons, mouse, windows, those things that made computing intuitive. Fired by Apple in 1985, he would later return and actually save it. The iMac revived Apple. The iPod democratized music, and the iPhone merged phone, music, camera, and the internet into one beautiful device and then put it in your hand. By the time he died in 2011, Steve Jobs had made Apple the most valuable company in the world by meeting the needs of customers and sometimes giving them things they didn't even know they wanted. Today we communicate, work, and entertain ourselves on sleek devices that sometimes feel like always-on extensions of ourselves. And if you're watching this video on a smartphone or on a computer that you control with a mouse, you can probably thank Steve Jobs and the American system that let his very, very, very big visions flourish. The common element for all of these entrepreneurs, whether it's McCormick and Glidden in the 19th century, whether it's Kroc in the middle of the 20th century, or even Steve Jobs up into the beginning of the 21st century, is the fact that they all had an idea that they were willing to bet on. But equally, if not more important, is the fact that they did it here in America, a country that was founded on private property, on individual freedom and capitalism, and by definition, a place that allows them to thrive if they succeed. And indeed, they all did succeed, and they became spectacularly rich doing so. But the thing is, they became rich not because they took from other people, but rather because they created a good or a service that people were interested in exchanging their money for. And that right there is the key to the success of the American experiment, is you've got a core sort of population who are interested in taking risks, doing something that's going to create better lives for other people, or maybe just make them a little more fun or even more interesting. That right there, that combination of entrepreneurs willing to take risks and individuals willing to exchange their work for something that other people have to produce, that's the golden ticket. And there's a reason why the United States has been the single greatest catalyst for human productivity in history, and that's it. That's that combination. And certainly we should all be grateful, but at the same time we should be inspired. Inspired to ask ourselves, what is it that I can do to become successful by making other people's lives a little bit better? And once you've got that, once you sort of figure out what that is, then you've got something to build on. So, well, thank you very much, and check back next week for more videos.